Okay, good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, March 11th, 2020. We are here at Freeport High School Library. We do not have Maura or Jen this evening. They are both excused, but we have the rest of the board, and so we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the February 26th, 2020 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Thank you. Susanna, second from Valley. All those in favor? Great. Adjustments to the agenda, we do have one.
Yes, we want to move the presentation on sustainability before the discussion on the budget.
Okay. Anybody have an issue with that? Okay. And so now we will move on to good news and recognition. And we'll start with the Maine Scholastics Art Competition. I think Jen's going to give us a quick overview.
Good evening. Unfortunately, our wonderful art teacher, Kimberly Metzger-Mahalik, could not be here tonight, so I'm here in her place. And we are really excited to recognize students who have been selected for some amazing awards in art. Kimberly wanted me to make sure that I explain that this is like states for visual art. That's how she explained this. So this is where we have some students who have been recognized in the Maine Scholastics Art Competition, both at the gold and silver key levels. These students will have their art on display at Mecca, Maine College of Art, and then they'll go on to be judged for the Maine Congressional Competition. The gold, silver, and honorable mention recipients will be also honored at a ceremony at Mecca. And at all three levels of judging, the works are selected to move on to the next stage based on the same three criteria, which has represented this program since it started in 1923, which is originality, technical skill, and emergence of personal vision or voice. So we are incredibly proud of these students who will be recognized tonight.
Yeah, right here. Right here.
I just travel with the pack. That's fine. So, all right. So, no, right. So first up is Reagan Davis. Yep. Next, and this is gold and silver for Reagan, and Alec Gideon. Saffron Labos. And also gold and silver Emily Parilla. Okay. The silver key recipients were Emma Berry, Ainsley Decker, Noah Height, Magnolia Sinisi, and Lena Stilkey.
Trust these to you. I'm more shy students.
Sure, except Craig will want to speak.
So it's my honor to recognize the boys' Nordic ski team. First, I'll start with a Western Maine Conference championship. They went out of cycle this year, and that's good. They won the Western Maine Conference championship in 2015, 19, 20. So you would expect the next one to be 21, but they bumped that cycle, and they were Western Maine Conference champs in 2020. They were state champs in 2016 and again this year in 2020. Congratulations, guys. And when your name's called, just come up front. What order do you have those in?
Not really any. So it's no order at all. It looks like so. Yep.
Maybe it's height.
Is your first one Caleb Hunter? Caleb Hunter. Samuel Robinson. Noah Height. Thomas Robinson. Elias Dorsey. Maximo Steverlink Horn. Now the next is Henry Horn. And last but not least, freshman Alexander Dawson. I also would like to recognize coaches Joel Henshaw and Alicia Dyer for their time and effort. If they're here, come on up front, Coach. And don't move while I get my camera.
What a great accomplishment. Let's give the whole team.
Just arriving on scene is Reagan Davis with the gold and silver for the Maine Scholastics art competition.
Okay, great work to everybody. Thank you for congratulating all of our artists and our athletes. I love when they're in both groups. It's fantastic. Okay, so we are going to move on to report from our student rep, and Liam is going to share with us.
Good evening, everyone. So I missed the last meeting, so I thought I'd recap a bit about the last few weeks that you may have missed or maybe not. So indoor track. At the indoor track meet on February 15th, Freeport took 7th in girls relay race, and Freeport's Emma Abbott took 3rd in the girls 200. Shayna Curry took 5th in girls high jump. Tara Migliaccio took 5th in the girls 400, and Martin Horn took 4th in the 1 mile. So girls basketball sadly lost to Yarmouth 50-40 in Class B South semifinals, but made it to semifinals, which is pretty impressive. So the boys Nordic skiing was just mentioned, so I don't think I'll recap that for now. But so now to some more up-to-date stuff regarding athletics. So Freeport High School is doing a speed and agility clinic, as well as an open gym to start preparing athletes for the spring season throughout March. Freeport High School is looking for a JV softball coach, and Freeport Middle School is looking for an 8th grade softball coach, 7th grade boys lacrosse coach, 7th grade girls lacrosse coach, and an after-school athlete supervisor. Interested candidates should contact Craig Sickles. And March 26th is the preseason parent info night for spring sports. So now some stuff regarding school. The guidance department had an evening yesterday about the college admissions process. The name describes it, so I don't think I'll bore you with further details about that right now. And there will be a college financial aid night on March 19th at the FPAC. And also the guidance team is taking a few students on a college field trip to Southern Maine Community College on April 10th. So some other stuff, there was a blood drive on Monday, March 2nd at Freeport High School. And there was also a print bookstore sale at the FHS library, so right here, on March 2nd to 6th, featuring many young adult books. Well, it already happened, so I won't talk about what was sold, but that was pretty cool, I thought. And also, the FHS Theater one-act performance took state runner-up last weekend. First time they competed in Class A, which was pretty impressive, and the piece personified what it felt like to suffer from anxiety and depression. So the show's positive message provides a platform on the importance for mental health education. So I don't know if anyone saw it, but I heard it was pretty good. There will be a state-mandated vision screening for 9th graders on March 16th, and it's Kindness Week, and Freeport High School is doing several challenges and activities throughout the week related to the theme. And I guess I'm a bit biased here, but as a junior, and because we urgently need funds, if you love chocolate, tea, hot chocolate, or gourmet snacks, our class is selling them until March 20th. So that would be it for now.
Okay. Thank you, Liam. All right, so next on our agenda is public comment. So if you have anything to share, we just ask you come up to the podium, share your name, where you're from, and keep comments to 3 minutes. I know. Good luck with the mic.
I know, right? Is there feedback on this thing? My name is Jessica Sturgis, and I am the district ESL teacher for RSU 5. I serve K-12 students, and I go to 3 to 4 buildings every day. I want to speak to you about the importance of this position, maintaining a full-time status next year. There are so many reasons why this position is not just direct instruction. It is also about making our families feel that they are welcomed and communicating with them, which is school-parent community partnerships as part of what Dr. Foley had written in the vision for RSU 5. As well, the joyful learning climate. That certainly is something that I provide for our students who come and have no language or have some language and can be in mainstream class the entire day but need a little bit more help. So sometimes it could be it's a language issue or behavior issue, and I need to help staff identify whether or not that is it. I have students who have been in the country for a long time but still need help with academic vocabulary. It takes 1 to 3 years to be able to have an interpersonal communication skills. It's called BICS. And it takes 5 to 7 years to have academic language proficiency with that. Our kindergartners have come in, and they have come with no language. They started some English in preschool, and they've just learned that as they've gone. But that means that there are gaps in their regular knowledge base. For example, not knowing the word for tent, or towel, or aunt. Those are examples of kindergartner words where direct instruction is necessary. English is also a very opaque language. We have multiple meanings for one word. Or the word can be used in one way and it could be used in a different way, so it depends on your context. So there are a lot of elements that make English a difficult language in order to learn. And I know that several of you on the board have had that experience with that. I only have 3 minutes. I have so many things I would love to share with you about this. The Office of Civil Rights does provide guidelines that students who are at level 1 and 2, which are very beginners, be provided with 2 hours of direct instruction. While these are guidelines, they're not a law, this is a good time frame. Right now, going to 3 to 4 buildings a day, I'm only able to do 1 hour. They also recommend that students who are at a level 3 to 4 receive 1 hour of direct instruction daily. Again, this is a guideline based on what the Office of Civil Rights has determined. In closing, I just want to read to you two parts of two different students' college essays in which they wrote about their experience of coming here and not knowing any English and what it was like for them, just to remind you of what it could be like for these students. One graduated several years ago, one will be graduating. Hi, how are you? My name is Miss Sturgis, and I'm your ESL teacher. Nice to meet you. Huh? That was the first conversation I ever had in the United States. And of course, I answered by giving a, I don't understand what you're saying, smile. Large campus, large population, small me. Every day I swam through the sea of people. Busy life was going on around me, and I felt like I'm the only one who stood there with roots growing up and clamping around my legs. I had more long classes, and most of the time I just listened to what people said without understanding. When I struggled and tried to run away from the darkness, I saw a light far away from me. I ran to it and caught it. The light was my ESL teacher, Miss Sturgis. She came to most of my classes. She helped me take notes of what other teachers said, then explained it to me in simplified words. Every time I wanted to give up, she told me that I can do this. At the end of sophomore year, I got a 6 on the ESL test, which is the highest score. And now this is the second essay. Not everyone is as lucky as I am to get a chance to start again. This would be my last chance. I couldn't let it go. When I came to the United States to go to school, I began to re-recognize myself. Going to school on the first day, I stood in the door and I felt that I was in a dream. Everything was so strange. Looking at people who were very different from my appearance, listening to them speaking the language I knew nothing about. At that moment, I deeply felt that I did not belong here. Watching the teacher give lectures and taking notes, I didn't understand any words that the teacher said. I sat in the classroom and listened to what the teacher said. I was confused again. Could I do it? Could I do it well? I returned home with my homework, and sitting in front of the computer, I started to translate the words one by one and tried to find the meaning of the words. At that time, I spent more time doing my homework than others. Later, I started learning English a little bit with the help of my ESL teacher, Miss Sturgis. At the beginning, I didn't ask the teacher what I needed help, because in my Chinese school, the teachers thought that I was a student who was not worth saving. The teachers would not help me, but Miss Sturgis changed my mind. I would ask her if I didn't understand anything, and she always would generously help me. When I encountered challenges or problems, she told me that it is okay if I don't know. Do not doubt yourself. She was and is always there to help me, and that is why she is here. She let me know that I am not alone. I could do well. Slowly, I started to understand what the teacher said and didn't need to translate. I would try to read first, and if I didn't understand, I would ask Miss Sturgis. When I began to understand English, she would let me try first, then teach me. When I felt it was hard to understand, she told me that it is hard, but I could do it. Take my time and don't give up. She's an excellent teacher. She's the one who helped me get to know myself again. After she helped me build up my confidence, gradually I began to try things I had never touched before. I read these not because they're about me, but because they're about the impact of a teacher, the ESL teacher, on these students who need to have that person that reminds them every day that, no, you're not different. There's nothing wrong with you. You are still learning, and that's okay. You are learning this new concept at the same time as you're learning the language. That's double the load, and that happens in multiple buildings. And my day can't get any wider. I do as efficiently as I can with my time and with the help of administrators. But there's only so much time in the day, and I cannot get to all of my students this year, let alone in a full-time, half-time position next year. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
This microphone makes me nervous. I'm Sarah Davis. I teach French at the middle school, and I've been here a while. And I'm speaking on behalf of, well, I'm speaking because of the proposed cut to ESL. I'm a dear friend of Jessica Sturgis, so it's very personal to me, but I'm not speaking for that reason. I'm speaking because I'm really concerned about the cut and the impact it will have on our kids. And that's what I think all of the teachers, at least at the middle school, I think in every school in this district, I think the bottom line is that we always think what's best for kids. And so I'll read my prepared sort of notes. So I don't want to be that district that says some students are more important than other students. I don't want to be the district who denies services to students who may not have parents who are able to advocate for their children as readily as other parents because of a language barrier. And I understand also that this job, knowing Jess, and the reason why it helps me to know her so well is I know how many extra hours she puts into her job. And I see the impact on the students that she services. And especially this year, we had a child come into the middle school with no English. And he was severely depressed, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I interacted with him on a daily basis at recess duty and in the halls. Clearly, he didn't have my class. But I saw the positive impact that Jess had. And I know it was Jess because I've talked to other teachers and I've talked to Jess. And that child smiles and laughs, and he didn't do that before. And he talks and he writes in English. He had not one word. That's impressive to me. And like Jess said, that's the ESL teacher. That's a full-time position. She can't even get to the kids she needs to with the time that's recommended by the Civil Rights Office. But she does what she can in multiple buildings. And I'm really concerned that if we hire a person half-time, they're going to be doing a full-time position for half-time pay. And as teachers, I think a lot of us have done that before and realize it's not fair and it's not best for our students. It's just not. So what I want for our district, what I want us to be that district who services every child, no matter whether or not they can't speak English or they're depressed or anxious or they have a learning disability or they just struggle in general because their home life is horrible. We need to be the district that stands up for every kid and does not lower our standards because it's a budget cut and because their parents can't say, hey, we need your help. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Tom McKibben. I live here in Freeport. I've been teaching down at Mass Landing School for 26 years. I'm also a reformed school administrator. It's been 15 years since I last administered. So I do know the time and the effort that you put into the budget and all the work that you're doing right now, and we really appreciate it. I'm also here to speak on behalf of keeping the ELL position a full-time position. Over the years, I've had numerous ELL students in my classroom. They're wonderful, and they add a lot to the classroom and a lot to the community. This year, I have a student from Vietnam. 2 years ago, I had a student from Colombia. I've had students from Japan and China and Korea, and they've all been great additions. The last two students I have came to my classroom coming to America for the first time, being new students. And it's a lot of work for the kids, and it's also a lot of work for the teachers. And we rely on the ELL teacher for many, many things. And I think it's a real shame that if we cut it to a half-time position. They provide direct instruction to these students. They modify lessons and work really hard with the teachers to help us be capable of doing the job. Sturgis recently translated much of the EDM math journal into Vietnamese for my current math student. They also support things such as parent-teacher conferences, providing translators, and that kind of work as well. And I just can't imagine like trying to do the job that you asked me to do with these students without having someone like Ms. Sturgis to support us. From a classroom teacher perspective, we don't need less ELL support. We need much more. One of the things, the biggest changes I've noticed in my time at Mass Landing is the number of people who now work at our school who don't directly work with kids. And I think it's a real shame that we would cut another position of someone who is actually working with students and directly working. And I hope that you'll reconsider that and support a full-time position, ELL position. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So now we don't have a superintendent's report. We don't have any administrator reports. Board committee reports, just the policy committee.
Okay. As you'll see on your agenda, you have 3 policies that will be considered and discussed today. We've met twice since we reported last time. Once on February 7th, where we looked at 13 policies, 3 of which you'll be looking at today. Several have to do with the board, one that, just reviewed, we didn't need to bring to you. One about quorum, one about rules of order, one about voting method, one about abstentions, one about minutes, and one about broadcasting, taping of board of directors meetings by the public, adjustment of board meetings, and then a few others, admission of non-resident students, extracurricular activities, and student organizations, limited open-closed forum anyway. Cynthia keeps us going. We usually have a long list. She has a goal of getting quite a few done. And at the second meeting that we had since we reported last and before this meeting was on March 6th. And some of the policies from that meeting will probably come to you at the next meeting, I would think, right? Yeah. We looked at a big long list there too. Quite a few of them that we'll be bringing to you next time have to do with bullying. And I don't know that any, we also looked at some that had to do with professional development kinds of things for board members. So that's about it. We keep going.
Okay, so Cynthia will take us through the policies for first read.
Good evening.
Board comments.
What's that?
I have a comment. We have board comments. Is this the time?
So that's on, we don't have it on this agenda, it's on every other agenda.
Oh, okay. So the fact that it says board comments on the agenda doesn't mean that we're...
So so board comments and committee reports, so if there's board comments and committee reports, they would be A, B, and C. So on the weeks that we have it, it's on there. And the weeks that we don't, it's like if you looked at the last one, it said board comments or agenda requests. So
we're just behind on policy, so this is not normally even a policy
right.
board committee.
We normally
meeting,
have neither of those, but
because
we missed one.
I requested that we add it today, so sorry about that. Just one note, the February 7th meeting that we did have scheduled was moved to the 21st because it was snow day. So we met during vacation week on that Friday to make up for the 7th, which got canceled. So, okay, so we have 3 policies that are coming to you for first read. In your packets, it's this color right here. I think you all have it. So the first one is agenda. There are just a couple of paragraphs that were added in the middle. Those are already in practice anyway, so it's not anything new. It's just that when the model policies come out, and it's been, I think this one is, what year? This was in 2014, so it's almost 6 years old. So this has been added to the sample policy since, and we actually have put that into practice. And then on the next policy, I'll just do these 2 together. And then the other one I'll ask Craig to come up. The next one is the Board of Directors relations with the media. So at our policy committee meeting, we had a discussion about this policy, and everything is exactly the same as the MSMA policy except for that last sentence. And so we discussed that last sentence and how it relates specifically to this policy. So I'd like to call your attention to the last paragraph. And it specifically states when individual board members receive requests from the news media representatives for information or comment as a representative of the board, they shall refer such inquiries to the board chair, who shall be the spokesperson for the board, and that does happen in practice. The next sentence seems to be an add-on at some point, and it says members retain the right to speak as private citizens on any matters. But this paragraph specifically really is only referring to an issue that the media is requesting information from you to refer it to the board chair. So we felt it really doesn't fit in with this particular policy, that last sentence.
Any questions on those two? Yep. Beth.
Just non-content, but there is a spelling error.
Please let us know.
First, it's the second underlined paragraph on page 2.
And it's our which policy? The agenda one or the media one?
Yeah, agenda.
Okay.
Judgment.
And
does not have an E.
Where?
It's right under dissemination of supporting materials.
So paragraph 2?
Yep. In this, well, the second one that's underlined, I should say, if that makes, I don't know.
Starts as an accompaniment to the agenda, that paragraph?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, great. Good catch. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there really no E in that word?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I mean,
Correct.
there's an E, but.
Correct. That's correct. Yes. Thank you. Good catch. Okay.
Cynthia, about the sentence that was struck out of the Board of Directors' relations with the media, is that sentence included in any other policy that we currently have? Because I agree with you, it shouldn't belong here, but
Right.
it belongs in another policy, and I want to make sure that it is included somewhere.
I think we talked about that. I'm trying to remember. So what did we, in ethics, the Board of Ethics one?
Okay.
I can look it up and
Okay.
let you know before the end of tonight.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I feel like it sounds like we have it in there somewhere that you can speak, obviously, as a private citizen, but.
Yeah. And then the last policy is sponsorship and evaluation of athletic programs. Really, initially, we didn't see, and I had spoken with Craig ahead of time and actually got the handbook that he uses, and so we discussed it, and he didn't really feel that there was any need for changes. But then when we looked a little bit closer at it, you can see on page 2, section B, the change is where it says following initial approval, new programs will be placed on it used to just say on a probationary status. In the sample policy, it says fill in like 1 year or 2 years. So we put the 2 years in there. And then in the next paragraph, we took off the last sentence where it says probationary status shall not exceed 2 years. We took it off from there because it kind of made it confusing. It seemed like you get another 2 years beyond that status. So, and I think that was the change to that policy. That's the only change.
Is the the recommendation for a new goes to who? To the full board?
So I'm going to have Craig come on up. Here he is. Because he knows the intimacy of the process. I've sat here every time he's brought that forward, but I think he's better to speak to that than I. So are you asking specifically about a new program like the swim team being brought? Is
Right.
That what okay.
So since we've become an RSU, we guess how many teams we've added? Ballpark. $17. Since we've become an RSU, we have added 17 teams. We have added boys freshman soccer, girls freshman soccer, football, cheering, boys first team basketball, girls first team basketball, basketball, cheering, boys ice hockey, girls ice hockey, boys swimming, girls swimming, and unified basketball. At the middle school, boys and girls indoor track, boys and girls outdoor track, and Durham Nordic skiing for boys and girls. That's 17 different teams. And when those all have been added, I've come to you, and with this form here, staffing adjustments to the budget for the previous year, staffing adjustments for the next year. So what we've added has been included in there. The other document has been the phase-in, when we've added new programs starting back in 2010. We've gone by this phase-in program, and it's been updated every other year or so, actually every year. Co-ops by MPA rule have to be school board approved. So every time we've added, when we initially added, they've come to you and you've actually had to make a motion, second, and vote. In subsequent years, those are 2-year appointments. In subsequent years, I have not come back. I have just continued, and we've reapplied to the MPA. You have to do that every 2 years. So that has come before you for an official vote for the co-op teams. The 17, well, actually, if you subtract the co-ops, it's more like 13. The other 13 teams we've added have come to you through the budget process, through this is what we've done, this is where we're going. We've gone from swimming to paying on their own for us, to helping out a little bit, to helping out more, to now moving to the next step. So that's kind of the process we've used for the 17 teams that we have added.
Kate.
I guess my question then would be, because this is kind of, we talked about this in the policy committee, was whether or not we were really doing what the policy states we should do, where it says it should come back after the probationary period and the board should approve it for either approve it, deny it, or extend the probationary status. And I couldn't recall us ever doing that, though I knew.
Yeah, we've never used that language.
Years, yeah.
We've never used probationary, but I think each year I come back through the budget process, and if you look at B, Section B, approval, the second sentence, the athletic director shall be responsible for making and supporting recommendations during the budget development process to the proposed, so that's kind of, to me, that's how we've progressed. I think it's been open and clear, and nothing's been hidden, and I think it's a gradual process that we've done with all these teams. With ice hockey, for two years, the parents, it was pay AA to play, and then after 1 or 2 years of paying to play, we subsidized to a level, and then the next year we increased it through the phase-in, and that's happened with boys and girls across. With swimming, they were paid to play, and they funded it 100% themselves, and then I brought that to you, and then the next year through the budget was, this is what we're going to add to the phase-in, and then 2 years from now we're going to add more for swimming. So I'm not sure we've used that language, the probationary language, but I think when students are paying for it themselves, that's kind of a probationary status. And is it viable? Is it working? Are there enough kids for us to support to start to fund it now?
So Greg, I understand that you have come to the board during budget season to request funding for these new programs, but the way I'm reading this policy, it's not clear whether that is enough.
I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Because here I'm reading I'm just reading the policy, and it says that sponsorship requires board approval. And it also reads that evaluation of existing or ongoing approved programs will be done using the same process used to assess proposed programs. The way I'm interpreting it, I might be wrong, but the way I read this is that the board needs to vote to formally approve any new teams, and that the board needs to vote to formally approve the ongoing funding and sponsorship of any teams.
So with the co-op teams, that has not happened.
Right, I recognize that. So I'm just bringing it up as I see a discrepancy between what we do and what the policy says.
Right, and I'm not sure I have a big issue with how we're doing it now. I mean, I think it could be a little more distinct, but we should align, similar to what we've done with other policies, like let's align if we're happy with how we're doing it, let's align our policy with what we're doing, or let's do what the policy says. I think we need to decide one way or the other. Kate?
Yeah, I think that's where I was going with it too, is I haven't been upset that we're not following what's exactly written here. I'd prefer that if we like how we do it, we just change the policy to be a little bit looser in how we do the approval. If we want to have something more formal, the board needs to make sure we start implementing that. I'm not saying it's any fault of Craig's. I think it's our lapse that we haven't, recognized
Requested
that
it.
we are supposed to put a vote on that after 2 years.
I do like the criteria that's laid out before a new program, though, and I'm not sure we've ever seen that sort of in a formal way for a new program. I guess what kind of the way I read it was a new program wasn't necessarily going from, varsity JV and adding a freshman team to, we have soccer, adding an additional team is adding based on demand, really, as opposed to we've never had a swim team and now we have a Freeport swim team, right? Like, to me, that's a new program, and maybe I don't know if it distinguished between the two in there. Maybe that's how we can, Beth.
I feel like, Craig, when you were talking about the swim team and the development of that, I mean, he kind of did touch on all of those bullet points, I feel like. I mean, he really talked about what it would be on the facility and, what the community, maybe not gender equity exactly, but, I feel like in some of his things, he's really definitely touched on all those.
I saw Valley's hand first. Yeah.
I was just going to add that when we were talking about this in the committee, all I could recall were the co-ops, and I was kind of thinking they are a little bit different because in a way they are in like a probationary period until we pull it into the budget, because it is like you're testing it out until you get the numbers and that you realize it can be a program that can be supported, and then you pull it into the budget. So we could potentially treat co-ops in a different way in the policy if we wanted to. We could just loosen up the entire language for all programs. But I think we either need to change our practice or change the policy.
So I think your point about we already had boys soccer with varsity and JV, and we just expanded what we already have. I think that's different than adding unified basketball. And if you remember when we had unified basketball, I could be wrong, but I do think you guys voted on that because that was a new thing that we were doing. I'm not sure about cheering, because we had cheering and then it left, and then we brought it back. So I'm not sure if you voted on cheering or not, or if it was just renewing something we had and lost because of numbers. That I don't remember.
Right. What made me think of that piece of it was the discussion about there being JV lacrosse this year, which there wasn't last year, right?
Well, quasi. We didn't play a full schedule, but we did play some games.
Oh, okay. Okay, then. Doesn't apply. Valley.
So I would like to comment what Kate said, and I agree that if you were saying this, that maybe the co-op teams need to be evaluated a little differently. We do have situations where we don't have enough players, so we have the co-op, and that's usually how it starts. But as the school grows and as the membership of our own athletes grows, sometimes we no longer need a co-op agreement. So I think it's important to reevaluate that and have the board give the board a chance to comment on whether we want to continue and re-up co-op agreements because of the special circumstances with those teams as our own student body grows.
So I'm actually on an ad hoc committee at the MPA level, and co-op applications are for a 2-year cycle. It matches the classification cycle. This year was the beginning of a 2-year cycle, and when schools applied for skiing co-op teams, they all were denied. And then all the schools appealed, and they were accepted. That has since made the MPA form this ad hoc committee to look at co-op teams. So we actually devised a series of 6 or 8 questions that we sent to every sport committee and asked them to evaluate how is the co-op team policy working for your sport. Do you have any recommendations to make it better? We anticipate skiing coming back and saying no more team co-ops, because as individuals, the way they are scoring now, they changed the way they scored at state meets. An individual or 1 or 2 can get a team score. So I'm pretty sure there won't be any team skiing co-ops after this 2-year cycle. There will be individuals, which is what we're doing in Nordic, where they ski with us. Our coach is their coach, but when they compete as individuals from Brunswick.
And that makes sense too, because in certain situations we need additional skiers, but sometimes we have too many skiers, and all of a sudden we go from Division B to Division A because we have 2 schools in. It's sometimes more competitive, sometimes not, but it does change the nature of the competition. So I think co-op agreements should be evaluated separately.
Okay, so my question to the board is, do we want to start living by this policy? Do we like this policy, or would we like the policy committee to take a stab at trying to revise it so it reflects what we're currently doing? Are we happy with that? Susanna?
One question that I have, and this may be my lack of interpretation when you were presenting to the board a little while ago, but here when it's what we're talking about, when you're saying that you're coming back for the reapproval of the sports through the budget, and I don't think I was aware when you were giving the presentation that part of that was that we're actually looking at the viability of the individual sports and having that probationary assessment.
Well, we've never used that term.
No, exactly. But I don't think I didn't feel that that was necessarily the opportunity to assess the success or not of the individual sports at that time. It was more your presentation of what the athletic department is recommending. So I think that I'd like some kind of clarity as to what the options are, and if you're presenting something, are we actually deliberating whether these sports are viable in the condition that you're presenting, or whether there's some discussion to be had. So I just want some kind of clarity, whether that's following this policy or what's been status quo.
Because it really would only be for those that were at the end of that 2-year period, right? I mean, we wouldn't be discussing the viability of the baseball team because we've had them for decades, right? And that wouldn't be picked up by this unless we felt there was a need to review it. And this policy does give us that ability to, as the board sees a need, we can say, hey, come back to us with an assessment of this sport. But, I mean, really, it shouldn't be that many, right? Because we're not, I mean, I guess we are adding a lot. But, you know, relatively speaking, in any given year, there's probably not too many to Susanna's point, I sort of segregate those out and discuss, like, these are the ones that are coming off probation. Are we still good with them? Yes, no. You know, if yes, then great, move them along, and we don't talk them. I mean, we'll talk about them again, but not for approval unless there was a need.
Is there a different policy that talks about the co-op, the procedure for the co-op?
No. I don't think so. So we might want some language just because we seem like we're doing more of those, and this could be this policy never really accounted for co-ops. Maybe it needs its own sort of paragraph even to discuss, you know, does require a little bit more instead of the set it and forget it for the ones after that 2 years. Maybe co-ops we are looking at every time they get signed. So what direction are we giving the policy committee? Valerie?
I am comfortable following the policy as is written. I don't think it will be additional burden to us to look at each of these new teams or re-upping a team after the second year. And as long as everybody understands that co-ops are included in sponsorship for any kind of team, then this policy would cover that, and it would actually allow us the opportunity to discuss them a little more in depth individually. But if the committee feels necessary to specify that co-op teams are included and are treated the same way and require the same kind of approval, then I'm happy to have you guys consider that.
Policy committee feel strongly one way or another?
So I would just want a little bit more direction for the co-ops. When do we want to write in as that probationary period starting? Do we include it even before we take it in as a program, or are we talking about when we first start it and we're doing like the pay to play, or we're doing the phase in? We want to revisit that like every year, or are we talking about placing that on a probationary period after we pull it in as an RSU program.
And what I was referring to was having the board give an opinion every time the co-op contract needs to be re-signed, or the agreement needs to be re-signed, and that will be every 2 years. Correct?
That's what I was
Craig,
thinking.
is that every 2 years?
Yep, and those have to be to the MP office 6 months before the first regular season game.
Okay, so you will bring it to us with enough time so that, or the board, I mean, whoever's sitting here. Yeah.
If we're not here, just bring it to our house.
Meaning future board members.
Yes,
We won't
right.
all be here forever.
Forever. Maddie.
So then I guess my question to Craig is, does that codifying this in policy, does that put a timing burden on you in terms of our ability to review something and you to get it to the, like, if I always prefer a little more specificity in policy, but not if it's going to create a problem we can't.
So all of our co-ops are winter, which means 6 months before that is like in June.
So if
My
this is
math-
part of the budget process and
Yeah, is my math correct? So it won't happen this next year because next year is the second year. So, I mean, when we have to fill out the form, it'll jog my memory to talk to the superintendent and say I need to get on. And the MPA is flexible. If we get that form in and I tell them I have to wait until the school board meeting the next week, they'll be fine with that.
Craig, is oh sorry.
Yeah.
Is it safe to assume that since they're all winter sports, that pretty soon after that winter sport is completed is when those discussions really get going between the co-op towns to say, hey, we don't.
Not until
so-
after the second year comes around.
Right. But for
Yeah.
that thing, so I'm thinking maybe it would really be like a March, April time when
Right.
those discussions.
Co-ops are a very unique animal. With our girls ice hockey at Yarmouth, they wouldn't be able to field a team without our girls, so they need us. When we first started with South Portland, they also needed us because they didn't play in a tournament game because they didn't have enough kids. And the other thing with not having enough, which we've dealt with in football, is if you don't have enough kids, you now have freshmen and sophomores playing in a varsity game where they shouldn't have no reason to be playing that game, but they have to because you don't have enough numbers. They should be playing JVs. So with our co-op with South Portland and Waynfleet, we now have cultivated enough kids where we had 9 kids playing, 4 on varsity, 5 on JV. So now it's cultivated a JV scenario, which helps the freshmen and sophomores, and it helps the program overall.
Okay. I think
Well, per MPA requirement, co-ops have to come to you anyway. I think the issue is it should come every 2 years, is what I'm hearing.
right. I mean, I think when we first started the co-op, I recall having you come and present, and we voted on it. I don't recall voting on it last year when it was renewed.
No, so
Right.
we've been doing a co-op for 6 years, so
Yeah.
I came the initial year.
Yeah. So I think the point is when it's getting re-signed, we want to just sort of re-bless it, if you will. Make sure that it's the right thing to do. We don't have enough to field our own team instead, just so that it's staying top of mind when those contracts are getting signed. Is that what we're... Okay. So I think that's probably just an addition of a small subsection on the co-ops. Any other comments on this or the other? Or are we ready for a... All right, so I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the policies reviewed this evening for first read. Maddie and Susanna, thank you. All those in favor? Great, thanks. Okay, so this is where we're going to bump 13 up ahead. Presentation from the Sustainability Committee.
And Dennis Willett will take us through this presentation. The committee's been meeting for almost a year now, and this year we had two goals. One was around becoming more sustainable with our nutrition program, or being greener, I guess I would say, and the other one was around energy. And so this update tonight really focuses on the latter, and just we're to the point that we need some input from the committee. So Dennis will do the whole presentation before we take any questions, but then we're more than happy to answer any questions you may have at the conclusion of his presentation. All right, Dennis.
Okay, thank you. So I have a slideshow with 16 slides involved, and I will go through each one of them. And like Becky said, please hold your questions to the end. I have some sustainability committee members here who I may ask defer for questions later on. We'll see what happens. But here we go. I think. Well, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is the charge of the Sustainability Committee, promoting practices that strengthens the sustainability of RSU operations and facilities while providing opportunities for environmental learning. We hereby charge the RSU Sustainability Advisory Committee to inspire a sustainability ethic or mindset in RSU 5 employees, students, and departments with an intent of identifying greener opportunities for RSU 5 while being fiscally responsible. So over the course of the year, we've discussed many things. We had some consultants come in, Ryan Collins from Efficiency Maine, Steve Sanderson from Apex Engineering. We had John Egan come in. He does a lot of the financing for projects like we're going to see. We have some options: energy audit, reduce before you produce, combined heat and power. We looked at that, and solar options. We have we've talked to Efficiency Maine about a scoping audit, which is a kind of a light audit. I don't mean lighting. I mean kind of a quick audit, low-hanging fruit kind of thing. And then we talked about having a comprehensive audit, which we ended up paying for a little bit. I did a quick audit at the middle school, and I'll talk about that after I get through this. It's just on lighting for LED changeover. We talked to, we've been offered audits by Mechanical Services. Apex talks about, they have a couple of vendors that they work with to do an energy audit, or an audit, comprehensive audit for energy and for pretty much everything. And Honeywell does them as well. The cost of a full-blown audit it's a pretty wide range. It's $6,000 to $30,000. We haven't really had any contact with anybody yet. We wanted to run this by you guys, by the board tonight, before we did anything. Efficiency Maine recommends an audit to identify potential projects and savings to reduce before you produce. Kind of stole that phrase from Steve back there. But we liked it so much we keep using it. Combined heat and power. We had our Steve Sanderson from Apex Engineering look at that. It uses a generator to provide electricity, some electricity to a building. We don't use a lot of hot water here, although we do use hot water for heating. We have very good boilers in our schools right now. They're not old. They're very efficient. The high school alone has a boiler that runs at 90% efficiency. We spend a lot of time. We've spent a lot of time making our boilers very efficient. So it's kind of tough to add another equipment into the mix. It's typically used in hospitals, hotels, and other high-energy year-round users. And after initial exploration, no one recommended this for schools due to cost and long-term payback. We talked to Revision Energy. They're a solar company. They provided the committee with 3 options. On-site, an off-site, and a little bit of both, a hybrid, like some on-site and some off-site. The on-site solar project, typically likely on a roof, like the high school roof. They pick roofs that were fairly new, so obviously you don't want to move arrays to redo a roof. No upfront cost in year one. There's a 6-year buyout at $383,000 or a 10-year buyout at $336,000. The annual savings in our electricity budget for the first 10 years or 6 years would be $6,000. Life expectancy of the arrays is 40 years. Off-site project installed on land outside the district, most likely. Investors purchase these solar arrays. There's no financial cost to the districts other than the purchase of the power. And we purchase the power at a fixed rate. Well, actually, there's an escalator built in. The annual savings is $75,000, and there's no electricity credit. That's our electricity credit. Term of the power purchase agreement is 20 years. And then the hybrid project installed outside the district, most likely on land outside the district, and some panels installed in district on a roof. The investor purchased the solar arrays for off-site project, and another PPA is entered, probably with another investor, for the purchases for the on-site project. RSU 5 would enter into a power purchase agreement for off-site and another one for on-site with a different investor, most likely. There's no financial cost other than the purchase of power during the PPA. A buyout will be available for on-site at intervals to be decided, and the annual savings would be about $69,000. The PPA term would be 25 years for the off-site and the on-site, and you'd be offered the on-site stuff, the on-site equipment for fair market value after 25 years or whatever you agree to with your PPA provider. Off-site is 20 years typically. How it works is the investor gets the incentives, they get the federal tax credits, they get the equipment depreciation, they can get the renewable energy credits, that's typically what they want to, and they get the power that they sell to us. Sustainability Committee, we talked this over, we looked at the best deal, we decided that maybe an off-site PPA would be right for us. There's no upfront cost. We get an annual savings of $75,000. With that, with your approval, we'd have the contract drawn up and reviewed by John Egan. He's a resident expert, and reviewed by the district lawyer. And we also would recommend budgeting $30,000 for a comprehensive audit for all the buildings in RSU 5. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Native American proverb. Anybody have any questions? I'll do the best that I can.
Thank you, Dennis. Beth.
Who are the investors? Is that us? What?
No.
So what
the
is
investors are the people who buy the equipment. Right now we don't know who the investor would be. It's done through an agreement with Revision Energy. They find the investor. They buy the product. They set it up. They contact the grid. They put the power into the grid. We just pay the bill. We pay the proposal's for 9 cents per kilowatt hour this year.
And we pay what now, just off the market?
We pay about 7.
So it's going to cost us more money?
No, it's going to cost us less money because it doesn't work that way. It's complicated, but I'm going to try to explain it to you quickly.
It's okay. I mean, unless others want to hear the explanation.
No, I can explain that very easily. So we're going to be paying 9 cents. We get a credit from the power companies when we produce our solar energy. This year it would be 0.1276, 12 cents, 76. I don't know how to say that, but So the difference between the 9 cents that they're going to be charging us and the 12 cents is 3.376. 376 cents. So we're producing 1,750 kilowatts annually. So what you do is you take the difference and you times that by the 3.76 that you're putting back in the grid, the net energy credit, and that's the 75,000 that they pay you.
I see. Okay.
So they're paying you for the power you produce, but you're paying less for it. I guess is a way of putting it.
Yeah.
It's out there.
So the buyout cost, like, how does that work, or what would that mean? I guess.
Well, so they give you a chance for an on-site or for an on-site project. They give you a buyout amount, so you can buy back your equipment after a period of time. Then you'll own it, and you'll own everything that comes out of it. So that's when you really save money, but
And
it's
that was
pretty
only-
expensive. It's $376,000.
And that was only for the on-site. For the
Yes.
off-site, there's no buyout.
No,
because
it's a
it would
20-year
be-
PPA. It just goes away after 20 years.
I mean, you could do your own off-site if you wanted to buy the equipment yourself, but that's just, I mean, yeah, no.
It's financially, it would be
Right. I mean, the
Gone.
reason they do it that way is because other companies can take advantage of the depreciation. As a nonprofit, it doesn't matter to us. We don't show a profit at the end of the day, but they want it because it reduces their taxable income, right? So they keep the equipment, they get to depreciate it. We don't care because we don't want it, we don't need it, and then at the end of the day, we have a buyout, and then we now own it. I had a question
only
on
on-site though,
Right.
typically. Right.
Right.
And we don't have to sell our renewable energy credits if we don't want to. We found that out today. I did some research. We can keep our renewable energy credits and retire them if we really want to, so that they can't sell them to the market outside of the state or for big polluters to take the credits, or, we don't have to sell them. I think that was Kate's question to me and to Becky in an email, and she shared it with me. We can keep and retire the credits. That will up the PPA rate to by a penny, probably a penny per kilowatt. So it would be, instead of 9 cents, we'd be paying 10 cents. We'd still have a net credit of from 2.76. So the annual credit that we would get would be about $55,000. So it would go from 75 to 55. It's 55. I wrote it down. 683 is really what we'd be getting for a credit every year.
Did I
by
understand?
keeping the renewable credits.
Yeah. Did I understand the on-site one is savings of $6,000 a year, and the off-site is $75,000? Like,
Yes.
why is it such a huge discrepancy? I mean, do we not have enough roof space to do
Right,
more
we
enough
don't.
volume?
Yeah, you would never have enough roof space to make 2,001,750 kilowatts.
So off-site is a bigger array.
Yes.
Okay.
It's huge, I guess.
Maddie.
Is offsite an existing array already that we would
Not
just tap
necessarily,
into?
no. Well, yeah, it could be. They'll add on to it with our arrays, So if we enter into agreement, they would purchase the equipment to be able to make the energy that they have set aside for us, the 2 million kilowatt hours per year.
But that's outside of our control completely, because that's the investors are making all of those decisions about where and.
Well, they make the decisions about where, but they tell you up front what they're going to produce. So, you would get that. You would know what you're getting when you enter in the agreement. I think you have a copy of this right here. It's the offsite project financial summary. So this one, that's where I got the 2,001,750 number. If you look on the first column, that's how much power they'll produce in the course of a year. So, yeah, I mean, I think I answered your question. I think that's what they'll build it to, that spec. It may vary a little bit, but the numbers will all vary a little bit.
So this is all through revision?
Yes. That's the company that we talked to.
Okay.
The town town of Freeport entered an agreement with Revision Energy.
Yep.
They're a local Maine company. We kind of like that. And we can have some control over our renewable energy credits and things like that.
Okay. I know with the change in the state laws, with Governor Mills coming in, it's really made solar so much more attractive to investors in Maine. And, you know, they're all coming in and putting in applications into the queue, and like interconnection points are 500% oversubscribed. And I mean, does Revision have a plan for how they can, you know, if we sign an LOI, do they have the capacity to get the power into the, I mean, because I know that's one of the issues is getting the power into the grid at a point that can take it.
Yeah, they said they did.
Okay.
They said they have a site in mind. There's some limitations on what site they can use because we're a nonprofit public entity. I think that they have to have a different, but they said they do have a site that will probably be ready in early 2021. The attractive part of entering into agreement now is the federal tax credit, which helps us reduce our PPA rate, is at 26%. It will be going down to 22%, and it could be going down even further than that as they go forward. So it's kind of attractive to enter into an agreement right now because of that tax credit, federal tax credit.
Which we don't need, but it entices them to give us a lower rate on our
Because
purchase.
they're going to be making some money, more money. You know, it's all about that.
It's all about that.
You know that.
Kate.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
What are our annual electricity costs and our annual heating costs?
Oh, I was supposed to pull that, and I didn't. I'm sorry. It's $283,000, I believe.
Or Ann, can you check that? I thought it was 268.
It might have been. It's close.
That's the electricity cost?
Yes.
What was the heating cost? Do you guys know?
Would this have any impact on that?
Well, it would.
It does to me because I feel like we're only like solving part of the problem with solar. We're only focusing on electricity and not our heating needs, and that's why I'm curious, just to know how much we spend on heat. Okay.
I can look that up. I can look that up.
And
It'll just take me a minute.
But thank you for finding out about the renewable energy credits, because that was one of my major concerns. Is that if we don't purchase them, you can't technically say that we are using sustainable energy.
Right.
So that's why I wanted.
It does make you greener.
Yeah.
You know, if you keep them.
Yeah.
You're just not giving them to them. You're not allowing them to take them.
Right.
There's no out-of-pocket cost. It's just, well, there is. I mean, based on the PPA
the price
rate,
that you're paying,
but it's
right?
a long-term thing. So you're losing $20,000 when you keep them, but you can retire them and feel good that you've done the right thing.
Yeah.
Green wise.
Because otherwise, what do they do with them?
They will take the renewable energy credits and they'll put them to the market, and out-of-state companies can purchase them. Out-of-state energy companies can purchase them to meet, like Massachusetts, Connecticut. They all have renewable energy portfolio standards they have to meet. So they've been taking advantage, of some projects in Maine to meet their renewable energy portfolio standards in other states. And now Maine is going to have their own renewable energy portfolio standards that we're going to be having to meet. And so there's kind of, we're going to be competing for those credits with the other states. And so I thought not only can we feel good about the project being sustainable and we can say that we are buying renewable energy if we keep the credits, but we also are making sure they stay in Maine. So that's why I wanted to know.
I know the heat. I know that CHP. The reason we looked into it was because you mentioned it, and we thought we'd give it a shake. We haven't done an audit yet. We're really interested in doing a facilities audit, including performance, energy performance audit. So, I really honestly can't say that we're not going to look at that closer. In the quick down and dirty, look at it was, it's not right now. We have very efficient boilers. We have very new equipment. We've done a lot of work. But I think if we did an energy audit, there's things that are available out there. Biomass. We actually talked about, we have a campus here with Moore Street. Exactly. Right. So, I'm sorry for getting in a conversation here, but we have an ability. We just don't know. I think we need to get involved in an audit to really dig and flesh this stuff out. And I think that's why we are asking for that $30,000 to prove some of this out. And then we'll come back and say,
Is there any benefit to doing the audit first before we enter into a solar, because what if the audit come back like, wow, there was another option, or these two completely separate buckets we're looking at?
I think it is, and I think there's no cost really to the solar option.
Well, 20-year contract.
Well, yes, but I mean, there's no out of money cost, So we
There's
can
opportunity cost, right?
Right. Well, I don't think that would really. I don't know how to answer that necessarily. I don't think so. In my gut feeling, I don't know. My buddy Steve over here, I don't know what he would say about that.
So I'd like to add one thing.
Or Valley, or
the size. The project is sized to meet 80% of our consumption right now. So we have left ourselves a nice buffer so that we still have 20% to reduce our consumption.
Okay.
Without losing the credits.
Okay, perfect.
He's a resident expert on our.
I don't consider myself an expert, nor do I have any money in this game either. So other than I pay taxes
That's
here.
good though.
Yeah. The heating energy is definitely different than the electrical loads for the school district. So looking at the solar plan is definitely different than looking at the heating situation. If we can reduce the amount of BTUs we need to heat the buildings, that's going to be better. That's part of that audit. So that's really looking at the load for heating. Electricity isn't going away. We're spending $260,000 a year on electricity. So to save $70,000 a year on a 20-year commitment in a contract, there's no money for the RSU to have to approve. So it seems on the surface from what we've looked at like it really does make a lot of sense. But that's also why we're recommending that people who know it better like to review the contracts and really understand what that is.
Yeah, that's where John Egan and our district attorney would come in.
Yeah. So the town the town of Freeport just bought into a big solar array, as well as the water and sewer district. So it obviously made a lot of sense to them financially. And we are definitely would be, producing solar energy that we are directly supporting. So it's a more sustainable way to go for sure.
Thank you.
And I think the annual savings actually changes with the net credit. The net metering credits change every year. So will our PPA, but it will always be to the good.
So that's the minimum we would be getting,
right?
In terms of.
And then we actually had Peter Joseph from the town come in and talk to us about this too, and he agrees that it's really a good deal. And that's why they entered into it. The question is, do we want to go forward with the out of district selling the renewable energy credits, or do we want to be green and keep the solar energy credits? I mean, it's not a fair question really, but I guess it is.
I think the first question is do we want to enter into the solar contract?
Yeah, I guess you're right there.
And then the second question becomes, if we do, then what do we want to do with the
credits? That's our recommendation, is to enter in the off-site.
And then, so, the audit recommendation, is that in anybody's budget yet?
In the budget I'm getting ready to present, it's in there.
I guess I just sort of had like a big picture dream, I guess, that I was hoping we could explore. And maybe it's just like a little bit too much for the district to take on. But with seeing how the high school and Moore Street, like you said, we have a little bit of a campus, but we also have a bunch of businesses right here too. And that's kind of like, I was thinking like this whole thing where we could like be generating our own energy and be on like a microgrid and not rely on the grid and be even more sustainable where we're not relying on outside energy sources. And that's kind of where I was going with that. And I know you guys were looking at combining heat and power for just the needs of the high school, but I was like thinking more like larger scale.
We picked the high school because it's the biggest building. So that's what we picked. I'm not saying that we won't look at all the schools.
But I would imagine the biggest building, you probably have the most efficiencies from a system like that. So I would imagine if it doesn't work for the high school, it probably definitely doesn't work for the smaller schools.
That's the thought. I mean, the energy audit will tell us a lot too, I believe, especially if we write the agreement right, where we add in a comprehensive energy audit or performance audit. Energy performance audit. We can hash that out.
Ultimately, you know, trying to do a microgrid or something can work in certain areas if you're out on an island or something like that. But the grid really ends up helping save us from fossil fuels over time. So the more renewable energy we can put into the grid and the more we can shave the peaks off the grid, that's really ultimately the collective goal that we should all be working towards.
That's that reduce before you produce.
CMP is not necessarily helping us with that, but if we are investing in solar, then we're investing in renewable energy that's feeding into the grid.
Right.
So we're offsetting some kind of other fossil fuel generation somewhere else. Most likely natural gas in Maine.
Right.
Jeremy?
And this is probably a question for the committee in general, but I definitely love the idea of the offsite and how it definitely looks like it's the most economically viable option. But was the sort of education of the students discussed that, if you're a junior sitting here and we're producing way off in a field and wherever that field is, do the students feel ownership and are they getting a educational value from that? And that's why I was,
we actually talked about that.
Okay, I want to make sure it was brought up. Because I could definitely see the combination.
Whether it's here or anywhere.
Right, field trips, but just I could see like the combination of just a little of, not token solar, but saying, we've got some solar up there that says.
We actually have some in Durham. We have some on the roof in Durham.
Yep. So
it heats the domestic hot water.
Yep. So just
at some point.
And if nothing else, just a board up somewhere in the school saying, we're generating this much power offsite and something like that. So.
Actually, that is something that comes with the PPA agreement. The company will install boards explaining exactly where the power is coming from, how it's produced, and they will put it in any of the schools that we want them to. Because we were concerned about, we have this great thing that we're supporting, and how will the students know that we're doing it?
Right, you take a bus trip to a field with a bunch of solar arrays. I don't know if that means a lot to somebody, but I think if we, if they teach them, that it's our electricity going in there. So.
What do our buses run on?
Well, they run on.
We'll use the propane one. Okay,
propane.
for that field trip. Okay.
At least not yet with the propane.
Yeah,
It's coming.
So we'll be considering more electricity.
Didn't you put an electric bus in the budget? No?
No, they're not ready.
It is not currently in the budget.
We're not ready there. We're not there yet.
I think the question
I
you
know
had.
you're there, but-
I think the question that you had, Michelle, about should we do the audit first? I think the only thing about the urgency is that it'll be going from the tax credit of 26 to either 22 or 21.
Yeah, it goes down over time, so next year won't be as good of a deal as it would be this year from a financial standpoint.
And we couldn't do the audit before December? I mean, that's
think
when the
it's gonna
tax
be
credit
a
would change, right?
process to get the right audit written out at what we want, and I think it's going to be a process to choose the right company.
And I really don't see the audit having any impact on the solar decision.
No, I don't either.
It's really a separate thing. Yeah, it's not going to say, oh.
If you could just step to the mic just so people at home can hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't see the audit have any impact on whether you're making a decision for solar. You're going to consume a lot of electricity no matter what you do.
Right.
So the sooner we start offsetting that, the better.
Right.
And there's a good financial incentive for that. And when you do sign up, you know, all these companies for revision right now, they have a location and a size of an array that they can fit on that location. So they are trying to sell it out to as many players as they can.
Right.
The one they were presenting to us will probably be full by the end of this month, and then they'll be looking for another one. There's certainly other companies, you know, and investors from out of state. I know of a New Jersey company. They've got 3 locations lined up, and they're looking for investors. There's a lot of different options. We like the idea of revision because they are local, and they've done a lot of stuff in the state, and they're going to give us good guidance that way.
They're very easy to deal with.
Yeah.
They're very open and honest.
They've done it for a lot of schools too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of it is a financial play, really, for the investors and for the school to save money and to invest in renewable energy. But the investors that are putting all the cash in, they're certainly making a return. So they're trying to, it's very predictable. The solar energy output is very predictable. So it's a relatively safe investment for them as long as the school doesn't disappear.
Or it rains every day.
Yeah.
When you guys looked at the combined heat and power option, did you look at it combined with solar?
No, I can honestly say we didn't do that. I think the engineer that looked at it knew that we were interested in some solar energy. And I think he had that in his lens when he looked at the project.
Yeah. And the real benefit with combined heat and power is really you're running a generator to make electricity and using fossil fuel to make the electricity, but you're taking that waste heat out of the generator to make hot water. And the schools just don't need a lot of hot water, so particularly in the summer. So it's sort of the payback just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean you would use it for cooling or something like that.
Yeah.
That's another process altogether.
Yeah, it's a different process because you're really getting waste heat out of the combined heat power system. So.
That's an air conditioning process that would require.
Right. Yeah, you would run a chiller or something like that.
Yeah.
But most of the schools don't have air conditioning either.
No,
so
that's why I
tricky,
was think LL Bean does.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So you're
right.
thinking of the
So.
microgrid theory. Yeah.
Yeah, and they run.
That's why I'm like thinking like
I
a little
will
bit
say
bigger here.
The engineer did mention, microgrid with the campus, but I don't know that he went so far as to go off campus to Bean or Gap or whatever.
Yeah, and Bean already has big generators over there. I'm not sure
I think they're
what else they
power
do.
generators.
Yeah,
I don't
they're
think
just generators.
They don't run typically.
Yeah. The power outage.
Keeps them open 24/7.
Okay. Thank you guys for the presentation. So there's no vote on this is just a presentation?
Well, we need guidance. We need to know, so I think that my thinking is that we need to know whether to go forward with kind of having John Egan look over the proposal and having the lawyer look over the proposal, and whether you're on board with putting money in the budget for the audit.
But those
Without
are
a
two
formal.
separate things, right?
Yes,
like the
they
audit's
are.
one thing,
Yes,
the solar could be
yes.
another.
Yes.
So does anyone feel like we shouldn't pursue the solar at this point? If you'd like. I wasn't sure if you're putting your hand to comment or to
I
say
just
you
feel
didn't.
like I'm still in the same position I was a year ago when this was brought to the finance committee, and I felt like we needed a bigger picture of our needs within the district first, and that's what I thought the sustainability committee would look at, was coming up with more of like a long-term plan and outlook first, and then we could make the decision to do the solar based on the plan. So I feel like we have no more information now than we had a year ago?
Well, I think what we had a year ago was sort of a more, it was a grouped proposal with us and the town and the sewer, and so we didn't really know what our piece of that puzzle looked like. I mean, they might have been able to tease it out, but I couldn't from what we had. So I think what we have today that we didn't have then is this is our usage. Based on that usage, this is the the project we could utilize, and these are the benefits we could reap from it. So I mean, I think we do have more information now. I agree that it's not a full sort of comprehensive plan for down the road, but I mean, my concern was that we did something short term that would impact or impede our ability longer term to do something different if that's what we came up with. But what I'm hearing is that's not the case from the committee's perspective.
It's kind of, it stands alone, really. You just realize the savings.
So, I mean, it's part of a sustainability plan, but they're not necessarily interlinked
Yeah,
with
and
other
I think
things.
we will get into a more comprehensive plan once we do some kind of an audit with some experts. I mean, I don't know that anybody on that committee is a expert on any of that stuff.
Right.
I know I teased Steve about that a little bit, but I think we need some direction when we move forward, and I think an audit would help us get there.
Okay. So the general consensus is that we should move forward with the solar project, but you guys don't need a formal vote for that.
I would want a formal vote after the lawyer reviews it and gives us the okay.
On the contract? Okay. All right, I think you have that green light to take that due diligence process to the next level. All right.
But the question remains, do we go as written in the proposal, or we do the renewable energy
Oh,
credit?
you need to know that before they review the contract?
Well, I think it's a different contract. I think it's a different amount. Actually, probably, it's just a different amount. So.
Right, the amount that
So
we're
I think
paying.
we could probably move forward with it.
No, we need to know for them to be able to draw the contract up.
Yeah.
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 So we should decide now.
We should decide that. If we're
It
gonna
changes
wanna
the contract.
go with keeping the renewable energy into our possession.
And we are confident in the difference in those 55 to 75.
I am. Yeah. I talked to Revision today about it. I was on the phone with him for.
Okay, so he reran it, assuming.
Yeah, a couple different ways. Yep.
Okay. So what are people's thoughts on that?
I'm channeling our departed colleague, Lindsay. I'm squint my eyes and say, so, if I understand this correctly, the 55 allows us to keep the credits, and we know that it's going to it's staying in Maine, but it's more financially beneficial if we don't do that, but it may be not quite aligned with our sustainability goals. Is that a good recap?
That's pretty good.
That's how I understand it.
Thank you.
I mean, you can. Steve was his name, right?
Yes.
To Steve's point, I mean, you're still partaking in a project that is creating solar power to the grid. You just can't ethically say that you're purchasing the green power unless you buy the credits too.
It's interesting. I had this conversation with someone, and they said the same thing. They said there's big schools that say, "Oh, you look at all our green power," and then they sell them to some polluter who's just using it to offset his requirements. And really, are you? Because you're just allowing someone else to do it on your dime or on your credits. So I see the philosophical discussion there, but it also has a financial impact, right? Are we willing to forego some of the savings? I mean, there's still savings and there's still material savings, for that. I mean, I tend to fall on the financial side, but I think in this case, would come down on the side of holding on to the credits rather than selling them.
And I also feel like that, to Jeremy's point, I mean, that brings something to our students.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's pride in thinking that we've done that. versus sell them to offset
someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like it could be brought into to some of the science classes. That could all be part of it. That would be my big vision, my big dream.
Beth.
I would agree that I would prefer to keep them.
Anyone feel strongly that they want to sell them?
No, just are there any ways that you can sell them to a sustainable or green organization of any kind?
I asked that question actually today, and I'm still not clear on the answer. I think you can. It's just hard to find the right person to buy them in Maine. There's a lot going on in renewable energy, but I think you can. And I will pursue that more. I think, we might recoup some of that, but I don't know enough about that yet to be sure about it. I did ask that question.
And I imagine it's probably splitting the difference between the 9 and the 10 cents, right? I mean, you probably get less because people who need it more are the ones we don't want to sell it to.
Right.
Right? They're willing to spend more for them because they really need it, as opposed to the ones who probably don't need it quite as much or not willing to spend as much.
You can retire them, but you get nothing from that. But you can be fussy about who you send them to, sell them to, which is a great thing in my mind. But
and were you able to pull the heating cost?
I'm sorry, I should.
Can you go up to the mic? Thanks.
For fiscal year 19, the total cost was $325,570.
That was the heating cost or the
That was
electric?
electricity.
Electricity.
Yeah.
We got to remember Durham's all. I mean, their heat is their electricity, right? There's no.
Well, it's,
sometimes there's
it takes a lot
propane.
of electricity to run that heating. But we don't burn any oil there or natural gas. We do burn propane, but not much.
Some days.
Yeah. We've rectified that.
Okay, so we don't know the heating costs yet, but those were the electricity costs. Okay.
Yeah.
But we need to know this. This isn't something we could change at any point once that contract is in place. We either keep them for 20 years or we sell them for 20 years. Okay. Does anybody feel like we should sell them?
I don't, but because I'm just wondering who does that. Who on staff is figuring out who that is? Who's a decent partner.
It wouldn't be us, right? It would be someone at Revision or CEI. CEI oftentimes I think buys
we
those
would
credits.
Determine our criteria for who a decent person, a decent buyer is. I mean,
if
I don't know.
If you want to buy them, Maddie, we could sell them to you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is Steve still here? Does he have any thoughts on how that process works?
I find talking about renewable energy credits very complicated. So I'm definitely no expert in that. But it does seem like investor would take those in that kind of agreement, and then they would sell them to whoever they want, which would most likely be another power producer somewhere else. And it was a way, renewable energy credits was a way to incentivize putting in renewable energy because then it gave it more value. But as the cost of everything has gone down and the way we can install them now in bigger arrays, it's brought that cost to install solar down quite a bit already. So the renewable energy credit is still out there as part of the play, but I think it would be good to keep them. Maybe there's some organizations that buy them, at a discounted rate and bury them more or less. I don't know how it works.
I don't either.
Yeah.
But I do know that there are people that buy them. I was told that today.
Yeah.
But I don't know who. I don't know enough about that.
I'm just wondering, does anyone know what the town of Freeport chose to do with theirs?
I think
they sold them.
PPA'd it.
They did.
They what?
And so did the sewer district.
They sold them.
So my take is that they looked at the project and decided that they wanted to capture the savings in their entirety, and they felt good that rather than burning fossil fuels in their own whatever in the current mix of the energy that's produced in Maine. They were adding clean energy to the mix, so they were improving the mix and making the entire production of energy cleaner.
It's still offsetting, you know, the more solar we put in, it's going to offset more gas generated electricity. So
right. Maddie.
This is going to shock everyone where I'm coming down, but we've mentioned one of our big corporate neighbors, and there's another one that's been in the news quite a bit lately that makes adult beverages, and their motto is "Do what's right," and I think we should also should keep them.
Okay, so yeah.
I was just going to say that like 75% of the energy mix in Maine is renewable from hydro and wind.
Yeah.
So most of the
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Oh, the rivers, right? The dams. And
yeah, Hydro Quebec, and so by doing this project, you're putting more. Yes, you're putting more solar energy into the grid, but you're not. I guess I would say we're still, if you go by what we're getting now, 75% of it is renewable already. So I mean that's not a bad mix. Maine is pretty good. I think that I could go either way on the credits, but it's just more of a like philosophical.
Right, and the fewer people that sell the credits, the more it forces those other companies who would buy them to seek other sources of hopefully clean energy.
Well, and also it raises the value of the credits so that they have to pay more to get them. So if you keep them, you depress the market in a way that they have to basically pay more to be a polluter.
Supply and demand, yeah.
So I'm all for keeping them if people are in favor of keeping them and not realizing the entire savings. Yeah. It is the right thing to do.
Suzanne.
I think I agree with keeping them as well. And on the committee, there's been discussion about on-site versus off-site, and on off-site being able to have a lot more solar energy generated. And if we're leading in that direction where we want to maximize the amount of solar that we can contribute to the grid, selling the credits seems counterintuitive. And I don't think I'm comfortable with that decision on the moral grounds.
Okay, so I think your direction on that piece is to move forward without the sale of the RECs.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for raising that as an option, Kate.
Anything else?
I actually raised an option that costs money.
I know. Duly noted, Kate. First time in how many years?
12
So
years,
Dennis,
7 years.
Dennis, don't walk away. We still haven't talked about the audit.
Yeah, so.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So, I mean, I don't know if that's something we want to talk about now or we want to talk about in the budget. I mean, either way is fine. I mean, I think it's going to be a discussion. I mean, do people want to talk about it now while we have Dennis? Anybody have detailed questions? Oh, you're not going anywhere anyway. Have a seat.
No, I'm not going anywhere. Boss says no. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going anywhere. But
okay.
I will answer questions about the audit that I know. I mean, we have options. So.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get to there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, so back up to 12 unfinished business, budget update.
Before I get to the budget update, I just want to announce the retirements of a few teachers. Becky Christie, Mass Landing art teacher, Jeannie O'Brien, Freeport Middle School science teacher, and Janice Murphy, Freeport Middle School language arts teacher. And we have two resignations. Bailey McGee and Anna Lee are both Laugh and Learn aftercare employees. Okay, so to the budget update, I think in front of all of you, you should have some pink packets because we're getting near spring. And so we have revised the budget sheets to reflect that. We have also revised the budget impact summary, and hopefully it's more understandable and transparent to you and the public The content is pretty much the same, but the order has changed a little. We have also, in this budget that is presented to you tonight, reduced our bus request to the purchase of 2 new buses due to the fact, since the last time I did the budget update, the state has signaled that they would likely not approve an additional 3 buses. They have already given us, told us that they would approve 1, and then the second bus will be going through the second round that they have every year. Due to some money left in the high school renovation funds, we have reduced high school requests by a little over $60,000 through the removal of the generator, cameras, classroom furniture, and microphones for the FPAC, and those will all be funded from the remaining money in the renovation fund. We have also received the amount for the Region 10 budget that Mara, I think, reported on last time, and we've adjusted that accordingly. We've also, after many conversations with Julie, decided to put money into the budget for another kindergarten teacher. We will continue to follow those numbers closely. And if we do add that teacher, we also have money for supplies and equipment that we'll need to outfit another new classroom. There is $30,000 in this budget that you're seeing this evening for an energy audit that you just heard about. And then through continually kind of checking this budget, we discovered that one of our maintenance staff had inadvertently been left out of the budget, so we've included that increase in here. And we have also received our bill, which the Finance Committee saw tonight, for our most recent just audit, yearly audit. And so it has gone up, and so we've adjusted our budgeted amount for next year with an increase of $5,000. Then lastly, since our last meeting, Ann and Aaron have done an internal audit on our nutrition program and are recommending that we increase the local contribution to that program by $25,000 instead of the $10,000. And this will hopefully help us to continue to decrease the nutrition debt over time, which is currently at $137,000 from our most recent audit that we're kind of in the hole that we're trying to dig out of. And those committee members, those board members that have been on the board for a while, you know that a few years ago we put $100,000 from the unexpended fund balance to kind of pay down the debt. It was, I think 4 years ago, way over $200,000. So we are making progress, but we want to continue to make progress in the right direction. We have not finished negotiations of the support staff, so this will continue to be an estimated amount, as well as for the property and casualty insurance. I do not see really any further changes, so I feel like you can really rely on these numbers as you begin your deliberations tonight. And then over the past couple of days, I have received a couple of questions that I'm going to respond to. There was a question about the ELL position, about are we actually reducing the position to a half-time position, or will that person be given another 0.5 job? We are really recommending that this is just a half-time position, and so that employee would go from being a full-time ELL teacher to a 0.5. And there was a question about projected caseload, and so I'm going to have Bonnie come up and respond to that. Dr. Violet oversees the ELL program. So go ahead, Bonnie.
All right. I just want to clarify that just like we have annual meetings in our special ed program, we are required to have ELL meetings every year. And so I think Jessica Sturgis was referring to guidelines from the DOE. And these guidelines are guidelines. But what we try to do as much as possible is to make sure that the students, our ELL learners, are in the regular classrooms as much as possible, because that's where their English really kind of blossoms, is when they're in the environment of a general ed classroom. So I just wanted to share that. And so I'm just going to review the caseload for this year and what we're looking at for next year. So this year we had 19 students in the ELL program. 8 were getting direct instruction and 11 were receiving consult or monitor. So of the 8 students getting direct instruction, 3 are graduating. So when we look at the needs for next year, we have 13 students who are going to qualify. 5 already have IEPs, which means they've been identified as students with disabilities. And of the 5, 1 receives ELL services. One parent has declined service for her child, and so that leaves 7. And it looks like, again, we have seniors that are graduating, and the monitor will be down to 5. So we're really looking at a caseload of about 12 or 13. And I'm adding the one who declined in case that parent decides she would like service, or the parents decide they would like services. So we're really going from a caseload of about 19 to 13. And so when we look at our neighboring districts, the average caseload is about, 30 to 35. And so, 7 students getting direct instruction or direct service and 5 on monitor seems doable for a half-time position.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I just ask a quick question on the neighboring districts? Just because, we do have an unusual with the travel piece. Is that sort of the norm for an ELL everywhere, that they're going school to school, or is that more specific to us?
I think that the districts that I received information from, Yarmouth was one, Portland was another, Westbrook and Lewiston. I think they try to minimize the travel from school to school because it's just more efficient to have staff in one school. But I think for smaller districts, like I know, like Yarmouth probably, they do travel. And the ELL teacher only travels in Freeport. So she really goes from the middle school to the high school to Mass Landing, and she has a few students in the kindergarten at Moore Street. So, even though we have 4 schools, they're all within like a mile or a mile and a half of each other.
Okay.
So the commute is pretty short distance.
Okay. Thank you.
What is the trend that you've seen as far as numbers, like say in the past 5 years? I know you probably don't have it pulled up, but is the 19 like around what it's been for the past 5 years, and this is kind of a sudden jump down, or and how many come and go per year, I guess? The graduation I get, but people moving into the district or whatnot.
So I think since I've been here, and these are really rough numbers, the population has been like in the mid-teens. 19 has probably been a little on the higher side. 13 is, within the range of what I've seen. I don't know if you have the numbers, Cynthia. I sent those. Okay. I think it's been like around 15 or 16 in terms of the caseload.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
And she's been full-time for that whole time that we've had the lower numbers and the highest number?
I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Bonnie, when you mentioned the 13 students, does that include students who are going into pre-K or K? How do we identify whether those incoming students have needs?
So we do have 2 students coming from entering kindergarten next year at Moore Street. But in talking with Julie Nickerson, we are looking at really having those students in the general ed classroom all day. so they can be exposed to language acquisition along with their peers. It really doesn't seem appropriate because they're so young to remove them, and honestly their English proficiency is pretty good. And I would ask Julie to speak to that.
Great.
I don't know if you want to say anything.
No, I don't have much to add other than our classrooms are language rich. You know, we're encouraging students to talk all the time, and I feel like what we've seen is it benefits them more to be part of that with their peers. They're learning far more from their peers than they are being pulled out playing isolated games. And I think, you know, that's a much more beneficial place for them to be. The gap gets wider as they get up into the higher grades and the content is deeper, but certainly pre-K and K, the best place for them is to be with their peers and in the classrooms, in the language literacy rich classrooms we have anyway.
Thanks.
So how do we try to ameliorate the impact of the fluctuation of the students with our staffing? Because my concern, not just with this position, but with any position, is that if we eliminate it to part-time, first, it's more difficult to get qualified part-time staff.
Mm-hmm.
And second, if we see the numbers climb up again a year down the line, then are we making a mistake by cutting it for the short-term savings and then realizing that we lost the full-time staff that may have been best qualified because we had to go for a half-time staff, and now we need a full-time again, and it just seems a lot of change. I'm not sure whether strategically thinking it's the wisest decision, but I'm deferring to you because I don't know anything about staffing and quality.
Well,
of people.
you know, it's just like all the positions we have in, you know, in the district, and I'm going to just speak particularly to special ed. I mean, we always look at, you know, the number of students we have and the level of need, and you know, the level of service they need in terms of staffing. And you know, if a full-time position isn't needed, you know, we would propose a half-time position, because you know, if we don't have the caseload to support a full-time person, you know, I guess I'm not sure. I guess the question is, what do we do with a half-time position if we don't need it? I understand, you know, moving forward, you know, if there is, you know, an influx of students, but even with a caseload of 13, even 15, you know, if our neighboring districts can support students, you know, with average caseloads of 35, and some of them have caseloads of 45, you know, even with a part-time position, you know, if we have more students move in, you know, there is some flexibility, there's some latitude, because even with a part-time position, the caseload is low when you compare that to other districts.
You keep thinking.
Oh, okay.
I was
so.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to respond. So Cynthia's she did find the number of English learners just from 2014-15. We had 24. The number went down to 21 the following year. In 16-17, it was 21. 17-18, 27. 18-19, 17. 19-20, 16. And next year will be less. So it's been on the decrease. It's been decreasing.
Is there something unique about this position that makes it so it's not a good fit to be half-time ELL and half-time something else, like we normally try to do with the half-time positions?
So what we'd have to look at, again, you know, people have to be certified depending on the position they have. And so I would have to research, you know, the ELL teacher certification because if she were to apply for a different position, she'd have to be certified in that position. But obviously, if we have a part-time position, we would encourage her to apply, and we would certainly consider her application just as we would if anyone else in the district applied. But it would be based on the certification.
And would it necessarily have to be under your department? It could be anywhere in the schools, right?
It could.
I mean, we're trying to think a little more broadly than just
right.
Okay.
I think just looking at the numbers that Cynthia brought up with previous years being higher and this year or future year perhaps being on the lower side of that, I'm just wondering what the division line might be. I guess I'm a little bit concerned about other years if it steps up again and needing to have a higher full-time position. What I mean, I see that if we don't feel we have the caseload now, but I don't want to put us in a position where in the future, if you're having 24 students, does that justify a full-time position? And having myself been in positions where I've suddenly been in school in a different country and I have no idea how I'm getting along, having that ELL support is massive for a student and a student's experience and success in school, and I'm really hesitant to jeopardize that. And
yeah,
so it's just
so you're looking where's the line in terms of
where's I mean, if you have 24 students, is that seems to me to be a lot to give the attention that some of the students need. But that's also a very different caseload than 13.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
some of those students, depending on how much need they have.
So just having worked in a district where they did have a high number of ELL students, there are many factors that go into how large should a caseload be. I mean, if you have a number of newcomers coming into a district and they're at middle school and high school, they will need a lot more support than, kindergarten students coming in as newcomers, because they're learning language along with their peers, whereas students who are older, they're not. They're learning the academic vocabulary as well as trying to become English proficient so they can have conversations with their peers. So they will need, more intense level of service. So it's not really just a number, but again, it's the level, the level of need of the student. To my knowledge, we had 2 newcomers this year, one at the middle school and I believe one at Mass Landing. And so they were getting a more intense level of support, but the other students on the caseload, they were getting an amount of time, usually 30 to 45 minutes, and some of it was push in because their English proficiency is pretty good conversationally, and at that point what they need to learn through ELL is the academic language, the vocabulary, so they can participate in classes. So our populations is, other than the 2 newcomers, a lot of their needs are being met right in the general ed classrooms. And I know other communities like Portland and Westbrook, for example, they have a greater number of students that are newcomers. And so with a caseload of 35, which is what I was quoted, they're meeting the needs of students that have more intense needs, as well as students who need more, push in or, not as much service.
I guess I just want to make sure that we're looking at and adjusting it there, that we're looking at the actual needs of the community, not just comparing it with numbers of other communities as well. So,
yeah. And, it's hard to anticipate, like, how many, families are going to move into the area. I mean, when you look at what's happening nationally, there are fewer families coming into the country because the federal government has set, numbers, and there's been a pretty significant decrease. And there's been a decrease in the number of families coming to the state of Maine as well. So, I don't know if we're going to get an influx. I mean, again, there are a lot of factors that play into that. Housing is a big one. And services in terms of service centers, in the community.
So, Bonnie, the decline that you're seeing in our district, is that being mirrored in other districts? Is this population decreasing everywhere, so it's a trend, it's not just our particular circumstances, which gives us a little more confidence that this is happening everywhere and may continue to go this way? Would you say that's true or not?
You know, I'm not entirely sure of that. I would have to reach out to some of our other districts to see if their populations have increased. And, you know, I know for a time they were increasing. I know the population, for example, in Westbrook went from about 70 students, you know, and then, you know, it went up like 300% in a couple of years. But I just think right now, because of the administration, really like limiting the number of students or families coming into the United States, I would think it would be less, but don't quote me on that. I will go ahead and reach out to Portland, Westbrook, and Lewiston and find out if they're seeing the same trend.
Right, and even communities right around us that are more similar to us. Like
Yeah.
Yarmouth,
like
and Falmouth,
Brunswick.
and Cumberland,
Yep.
Brunswick. I would like to know, because I don't want to be short-sighted about this. I
Okay.
don't want to spend more money than it's necessary, but at the same time, I don't want to be here next year thinking, oh, we shouldn't have cut that position, because now we need a full-time position.
Right, okay.
And we lost someone who qualified and who does the job well, apparently.
Yeah. So I will do some research on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I did hear a recent comment, and I can't remember where now, but they have talked about how a lot of the immigrants might move to a community outside of like Portland and Westbrook, but a lot of times they move back because they want a community that's more similar to them. I also do know, just from a recent article I read, that Yarmouth has noticed an increase there, but you know, other communities, I think they haven't, and they tend to go to, you know, like Portland and Lewiston, where there's just a bigger community.
I'm just seeing that the overall population is growing in our 3 towns.
Yeah.
So that's a factor too. We're not shrinking, we're growing. So I don't know in that growth how many ELL students may come to our doors, but it's one of the factors to consider too, that we're growing. So we'll be seeing more students coming our way.
And I'll check with the Department of Ed, because they usually keep data on that, and they would probably know the number of ELL students in every community. So I'll check on that as well.
And I will say, you know, we did not come lightly to this decision, and it's not based upon 1 year's trend. And as one of the speakers said earlier, we do want to meet the needs of every kid, and I think we strive hard on the administrative team to do that. And you have seen us come with multiple requests where we're looking at individual needs of students and not looking at the number. So sometimes we've requested another teacher when it looks like the numbers are plenty small to meet the needs. And so we do want every child in RSU 5 to meet their potential.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Sure.
Okay, so my other updates, there was another question around projected enrollment for preschool. And so I have that. And also for Moore Street kindergartens and 2nd grade. So you can see for pre-K currently we have 32 enrolled with 11 on the waiting list. We have 16 at Pownell with 1 on the waiting list. And at Morris Street, we have 57, so we have 7 open slots. And usually around August, we will open up to anybody that's on a waiting list an opportunity to take one of the open slots in the district. So we would be reaching out to the Durham families if these numbers stayed exactly where they are now, and we would tell them there's an opening at Moore Street School if you would like that for pre-K. Kindergarten numbers, I don't think they've moved, nor have the second grade numbers. We have 98 currently enrolled for kindergarten next year at Moore Street, and second grade is still at 83 with one of those students on a superintendent's agreement from Durham.
You agree with yourself to?
Yeah, well, yeah. We
No, not taking
might
it.
call it something else. What do we? Assignment to schools. That's what it's called. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, and I always agree with myself. For the record.
And can you remind me the number of teachers for that kindergarten cohort of 98?
So we're now recommending, where's Julie, 6?
That's 6.
Yep.
It was 5, but with
Yes.
the addition is 6.
So, Becky, do we provide transportation when we offer slots for pre-K in a school that's outside of its sending town?
No.
Could we do that? Could we
Could we
consider
do that? Philosophically, we could.
Dennis is running out the door.
You know, the challenge is, do we have enough? I mean, I would be hesitant to do that because of how the logistics with our vans and drivers and everything else. So we always have a challenge to get all of our students with disabilities to where they need to be.
So we are sending vans around because there's programs in one town and kids from another.
Absolutely.
So we are doing something similar to this potentially in terms of.
Yeah. So if it just happened to be that one of the students was living next door to another student and they both could ride on the van and behave, I mean, that would be great. So, I mean, I think if we could do it, that would be ideal, but I would not want to guarantee it, and we don't do that. We have assignment to schools in all grades, and we don't offer transportation.
Yeah, where I'm coming from is that we have set a goal for ourselves to provide universal pre-K, and it really saddens me to see that there's so many kids on the wait list, and there are slots opens in schools that don't have enough kids. So I think we should try hard to fill all the slots or open up another pre-K classroom so that we can consider that, or just come closer to our goal of universal.
Do we know what's happening? I feel like Durham hasn't had a wait list before, and
Yeah.
now, I mean, they have almost as many kids wanting pre-K as Freeport with, less than half the population.
So, Will, would you like to talk to what's happening in Durham?
Is it all because Stephanie is that amazing? I'm just curious if we'd heard why there were so many more this year than prior.
No, we haven't. That was really about my update.
Thanks.
It's, I do think that there's an aspect to this that that as families become more familiar with the program existing, and then hearing from neighbors or friends that their children have been in it, because it's still a relatively new phenomena for our school. So that is, a typical kindergarten year for us is in that 40 to mid 40 range. So a high group is 51, a low group is 39, and that's been pretty consistent for a lot of years. But generally kindergarten is around 45. That's what we generally anticipate.
So this is almost all of the
So it feels
next
like,
year's
right.
kindergartens.
So the question really there is either this is going to be a big kindergarten group that we're unaware of a year from now, or that more people are saying, actually, we would like our child to come to that model now.
So it's still pretty early in the spring. So in your experience, do we see a lot more people signing up later in the spring?
This
for
is the
pre-K?
earliest, and we didn't open it. In the past, the way the timing works is that when you see that number on the wait list, people don't yet know they're on a wait list because they're not yet. So what happens is the process is that we had set, because we know we don't have enough slots if everybody came. This Friday is actually our sort of deadline, so March 13th. From that timeline,
So
the number
deadline for.
Pardon?
What is the deadline for?
To
Okay.
sort of register. So if we had in previous years, because next week is when we do pre-K screening, and the way it's set up is that if we had, when we do pre-K screening, we prioritize those children who have a significant need, children who are transitioning from CDS or have perhaps not accessed CDS but perhaps should have. Let's, for argument's sake, say we have 8 children who meet that criteria. Those 8 children will get a slot. That would then leave us with 24 slots available. And if by March 13th we had 23 people registered, they automatically get a slot, and then it would become first come, first serve. But at this point, what will happen is it'll be a lottery. So again, let's guess we had 8 slots that were taken as sort of priority children. Those 24 slots will then be determined just by a lottery, and that's what would determine who does or does not get a slot.
But historically speaking, have you, in your experience, seen more pre-K students come in later to the game past that deadline?
We
so
haven't.
can we expect to see more students come?
Potentially, yes. This was the quickest they have signed up ever was this year. So we only opened it March 1st, and we filled within 2 weeks, basically. Oh, no, it wasn't March 1st. It was, I can't quite remember, but it filled up very quickly, much quicker than usual. So I would definitely anticipate more. What you sometimes see is that the wait list come the summer isn't really representative because people need a plan. And so if they, for example, last year after we had done sign-ups, when folks realized that, like, yikes, you know, I may be on a wait list, I need something firmer because area, either other preschools or daycares, they're doing all their sign-ups already. They're well established. And so people are worried they'll miss something else. So they won't really wait until August to see if there's a slot. They'll move on with an alternative plan, which is why we then end up during the school year not really having a wait list because people already found a plan B. That sometimes opens up if someone moves to the district and someone else had perhaps moved out. But the wait list will sort of most likely dissipate before they get a slot.
Okay. And I think my last question was, I was asked to provide an update on Mass Landing's latest fundraising numbers for field work. So Emily, would you come up and speak to that?
So I can clarify the numbers, but it may be helpful to get clarity on the question. Do you want me to answer how I think the question was posed and then go from there? Okay. So last time I spoke, we were at a parent payment rate of about 40%. We are now for our 5th grade cohort at 70% paid, which is just slightly below average. We have done some additional fundraising through our, the PTC collaborated with us to create a parent directory that went home to families in the last week. And the ads in that have helped subsidize the cost. We're currently about $3,000 short, but I anticipate that will be offset by some additional fundraising. A final head count. So right now I've budgeted for all 89 students to attend. And we may have 2 or 3 who do not attend, and then getting creative with pulling from our office account, for example, or getting additional support from PTC to create, to fill the gap.
So are you confident that you will get the help from PTC to cover the 3,000?
I am confident that I will be able to cut a check to Chwanki on May 12th for the full payment. Yes.
And that everyone who wants to go will be able to go?
Yes.
Okay.
And that concludes my update.
Okay, so so now what we have on our agenda is just the start of the board deliberations for the budget. We have 3 meetings that include deliberation time. So we have this meeting, we have a meeting next week. Yeah, the 18th. The 18th is the additional meeting that's on, and the only thing, the only thing on the agenda is deliberation, essentially, of the budget, right? As of right now. And then that following week, so we've got 3 weeks of meetings in March, and then that 24th or 25th date. Okay, thank you. Is when, you know, ideally we will be adopting the budget. Okay. So that's the process. The other piece of that process is next week's meeting. It's at next week's, right? The 6 o'clock is the Q&A before the meeting. No dinner this year. Bring your own. Yeah, right. We're all doing our part. And so for the public who have questions about the budget or comments that they may or may not be comfortable sharing at a full board meeting on camera, they can come share it with the board. And then we also have the time built into the budget built into the agenda next week for public comment on the budget. So folks will have, I think you're going to go through a quick overview at that meeting, and then we'll open it up to public comment on the budget to help us in our deliberations. Because in a perfect world, the end of next meeting, we essentially know what we want to see that following meeting to vote on. Right?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So, with that framework, I guess I would just open it up for comments on the budget in general, any specific comments on areas. I'll lead off and start with thank you to the administrative team. You know, the whole team. I know this is a ton of work for you guys that starts back in October. So this is a long process. And of course to Anne for all her work jumping right into the fire of the budget season. So thanks to all of you guys for the hard work. And you know, we've got more coming for you. So let's. Liam, anything? He's still making his list of questions.
I'll start.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for all the revisions and all the additional information. So in order to make some wise decisions in the coming 2 meetings when we deliberate, I am looking forward to getting the information from Bonnie about other schools, trends that they're seeing with ELL students and enrollments in general go up and down. And I also would like to make a request to the administrative team to try to come up with a creative solution so we don't have so many pre-K students on waiting lists.
Are you wanting just to see an additional pre-K teacher added to Durham? Because or what is your creative thinking leading you to?
Yeah, I would like to, first of all, see from all the different schools historically how many students they see added later in the spring. And the explanation about people on wait list just going their way makes perfect sense, but in the absence of that wait list, how many can we expect to get? And then based on that, either just put in for another classroom in Durham or put in for transportation to move kids from Durham to Moore Street if there's any expectations that those slots will still be open by the end of the spring at Moore Street. No.
Oh, Julie? Yes, thank you. And at one of my superintendent's Q&A, some of the feedback I received was that it would be helpful if board members lean into their mics more when they spoke, with the exception of Michelle and I. So they, so some of our community members that are watching from home, at times they cannot hear some of the board members, and I meant to say something earlier, but I just remembered it. So thank you.
So it's still early days and it's hard to tell. You know, really, as Will said, our pre-K programs are relatively new and things are surprising us all the time in terms of our numbers. But the 3 years where we have progressively added sessions, we haven't been full at this time of year, but have been full by September in each year. So I think it's realistic that we will fill them, but no guarantee. So I think that's kind of the essence of why Becky waits till August, and then we offer them to those who are waiting in other places. And it's been reciprocal. You know, there's currently Freeport students in Pownall, and I don't think we haven't got anyone go anywhere else. And then we've had students come from the other towns in other years too.
And I think the other thing to think about on that pre-K transportation piece is if they're having to find alternatives, those alternatives are always going to include them bringing their kids somewhere, right? So transportation is going to become, it's going to be expected of them in either scenario. And if we can even give them a slot, it certainly makes it a more financially viable option because we're not also charging.
Yeah, it's just a question of parity that we're all residents. Everyone pays the same amount in taxes, and some families have their local school accept their students, and other families who are not lucky enough to get those slots through the lottery may have to go to another school where their kids are probably not going to be peers with those kids for the rest of their elementary years. And in addition to that, they need to bring them there and pick them up. So, but it doesn't sound like transportation is the answer anyway. So another creative solution is to put more money in contingency so we have it there and we can add that classroom later if needed. If there's no confidence that we'll actually have enough students to warrant a new classroom.
Is there room?
So I just, Will, I'm going to have you come up and tell me about
where are you going to put them?
Where you're going to put them, and then I would just ask Ann to, if she can, kind of run the, or maybe we'll have this for next time. When you add a pre-K teacher, you have to add an ed tech, and so but that would be half-time because it'd be one section. Well, do you want to respond to all that?
Sure. Numbers-wise, in theory, it would be a half-time position, which would add 16 slots, which would put us at 48. And given that that's, as I said to you, that's sort of generally our outer range, we usually anticipate 45 for kindergarten. So it would be a half-time position, and yes, half-time tech for that role too. Then in terms of whether we would be able to accommodate it, I'm sure we would find a way of accommodating it, because we would far rather get as close to universal as we can. I can certainly look at that and then be firmer on it, but I think we'd be able to find a way of doing that.
I think just a rough number would be, it would be an increase of about 74,000, and I base that on a half-time teacher, half-time ed tech, and then when Julie was prepping for the new K teacher, we included 15,000 because you have to buy the curriculum, the furniture, those kind of things. So I think it would be 74,000. So, and it would be important for them to just know what does that do to the expenditure increase and the tax impact.
And I also think it's important to realize that 74 or whatever is the first year, right? So that the setting up of the classroom is a one-time thing. It's not every year, right? It's only that that first year you would have to do that. But I'm curious, just because we've heard about it in this budget cycle and in the past, our specialists in Durham are already servicing a lot of kids with only one of them. Adding another section of the pre-K, is that continuing to overburden, or does?
So, I mean, I'm not necessarily making it up, but I'm responding to a question without having put a whole lot of thinking into how that would roll. But you know, our program is, so one of the things we'd have to look at, because it might be hard to hire for this, but in theory it could be 0.4, because that would be 2 days. And if we had priority students in that section, you know, they may then join in on that Friday group that or is already a smaller group, or we might make that additional 0.4 section not a priority group. We'd have to just figure that out. So, I mean, it would mean that potentially we have one more mix of pre-K in the specials mix, 2 to potentially 3 days a week, but there's also additional support person with them. So, you know, we would look at, there's the capacity to accommodate one more section during that. We have 5 specials. We have 3 kindergarten, 1 pre-K, and what happens is the pre-K do shorter sessions. So they do like 25 minutes, 25 minutes back to back. So there is a slot that could also, that other 25 minutes could be filled.
They could swap.
So we could accommodate it. You know, we could also look at whether it's a bigger group done in a different way with certain specials with the 2 support staff with the children, for example. So I think we could accommodate that.
Okay.
I may get in trouble for saying that tomorrow morning, but
All the specialists will be on your front doorstep.
Exactly.
That's okay. I'm sure they don't watch this. Okay, so ELL enrollment, we're going to bring that info back from the surrounding areas. And then, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can drill into those pre-K numbers for an additional classroom to tell us for sure. But I think you guys can, if that's something you're interested in, you can probably expect $75,000 for that. That's including the 15. 59 plus 15, so 75.
I thought that one whole teacher was usually around 74,000, and we're talking about 2 half. And we're talking
82.
about 2 half times.
It would be a half-time teacher,
And
and that's
ed tech.
it sounds like that's at the high end potentially. It could be even slightly less than a half-time teacher. Could be a 0.4 if they only did 2 days a week instead of.
Why is that not adding up for me?
So 82 divided by 2, and then half ed tech, so 36 divided by 2, so 41 and 18 brings it to 59, and then 15 for the
Oh, okay.
classroom.
I was just taking one teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was too.
Roughly. Okay.
Yes.
Did I miss around? Did he say that there was space, or were we just talking about?
I think
the
he said
space?
he'd find room for them.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you. Sorry.
If he didn't, he should have said that. If he couldn't have found room, he probably should have led with that as opposed to all the other stuff.
So I crunched the numbers through our budget impact summary. So if we made this addition, the total operating budget would increase by 4.12% as opposed to 3.9%. And the impact to taxation district-wide would go up to 5.59% from the current 5.31%.
Any other clarifying questions, details that people would like to have to help them deliberate?
Sorry, was that just adding the pre-K? Okay, thank you.
I was curious about with the Moore Street School edition of the kindergarten teacher, was the space issue worked out completely, or is that still something that we are talking about as far as the modular?
Julie, do you want to respond to your best thinking?
My 7-minute presentation is now not paying off, right? Put my time in now. So we have figured out a way for this year that we can solve our space. So what we will end up doing is having our STEM and art teachers are both part-time, shared with Pownell. The reason they currently don't share space is that there's an overlap of one day where they're both in the building at the same time. So we're going to have them share space, and on one day the STEM teacher will go to classrooms, opening up that space to be a classroom.
And I think that you did say that before. I just wasn't sure if that was like, the actual plan and defined, and that was it. Okay, thank you very much.
Don't go anywhere. So the Moore Street, the addition of the classroom of that teacher, I recall you saying that also was a tipping point for specialists and everybody else. Is that all baked in, or were you able to maneuver around that as well?
So there's space in 3 of the specials. So the STEM, art, and library. There's space for another classroom to be added. It's PE and music that would tip the balance. And is that, I'm looking at Becky because we've had lots of conversations around this, and I don't know how it ended up shuffling out in the end.
So I think that it will not have a budget impact because Mass Landing is losing a classroom. So we feel like with the money that's in the budget, we can figure that out.
And in terms of the actual instructional time that the specialists need to provide to the new classroom, that's all figured out too?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay. Again, can she sit for now? All right. We're reserving our rights, but go ahead. All right. Other questions? Areas they want to pursue? Yeah.
The 25,000 for nutrition that we're going from 10 to 25, is that for every year from here on out, or just for this year? It's 25 permanent.
No, I do not see that amount going down.
Right, because we've never gotten to 0, right? I mean, we took a big. I feel like we took like half of it out when we did that big $100,000 one, but I mean, it's still now creeping up again. So we're not making any progress, and it's getting bigger again. So, and I know there was we prompted some of that through the waiving the delinquent balances, but.
And that $100,000 is still in there, right? Like every year we're still doing that, or that was a one-time?
That was a one-time because
it was.
we do our annual contribution to it, and that was separate. But we did a allocation from the undesignated.
What's the annual? 200? No.
What's that?
What's our annual?
That's a good question. The annual local contribution that we're doing to the nutrition program, I feel like it's almost $300,000. But Ann, could you check on that? I mean, it should be right here in this sheet, right?
I feel like I just saw it on the warrant today.
I feel like it was like today. Yes, I think it was on the warrant.
It is they do it monthly. They do a nutrition, right?
Yeah, but it would be increased in this.
She's not jumping up.
I'm looking up.
Or Erin may know that off the top of her.
She's looking. I'm like, she's not diving off that chair, so she's looking too.
So it was $268,000 about last year.
Oh, here it is. It's on page 43 of your pink Easter color packet. And that is, so we're currently requesting $293,245.
Okay, so just under 300.
Yep. Yes.
I had a question on the overview sheet to the new one in the savings. Transportation savings went from like 169 like 2 sheets ago to 235.
That's because we failed to put when we went from 4 buses to 3. We forgot to change the number. And so now that's really 2 buses in there, correct, Dan?
So buses up top went from 99 to 66, so we went from 3 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then savings down below. Oh, is that because buses are coming off lease? All those leases we bought at once? Okay. Oh, okay. So we were thinking some were coming off, but there were actually more coming off than we had thought. Okay.
No. The savings have increased because we've decreased the number of buses that we're now requesting.
Nope, that comes out up here.
No, I know that comes there too.
Well,
That's
you
a
can't double
driver.
count it.
Well, no,
Really?
that's a driver.
No, that's the buses.
Yeah.
That's not the driver.
No, I mean,
33
the drivers of the budget.
Oh. She's finding drivers everywhere.
I know. I wished I could find more drivers. And I'm going to have you come up and explain it. I think we missed changing that proposed cuts in the tan sheet. Is that what
In
you
the
were
tan
saying
sheet,
today?
yes, that's correct. So that was an error, and it should be corrected now. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Did
I'm
I
still
answer
not
that
following,
question?
but it's fine.
Let me see if I could say it a different way.
No,
Because
it's
I
fine.
want you to
It's-
follow.
I
You're
think
like a
I-
money person. Okay, so
I have a
I
general
think
idea.
I think if you look at what we currently have for leases, is it going down by 235,000?
I believe so, yeah. Yep.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Kate.
Sorry to keep talking about the buses, but so we've got it as an increase and a cut, and that's what's confusing to
I
me.
know. Do you want me to take it off one?
I'd just like to see the cut because it's
So
right. It's $235,000 in savings. $66,000 is whatever. An increase
Well,
in what?
66,000, what I'm trying to share is that we are adding 2 buses to the fleet. But I can see why it's confusing. And so we could definitely, if you said we just want status quo in our bus fleet, we could have even a larger savings. But if you'd like me to eliminate one of them, I'm also happy to do that. But then I feel like I'm not telling the full story.
Can you put a little in parentheses explaining what's going on
I like
in
that.
the addition
Yeah.
and the subtraction?
Okay. Yes. Great.
We love parenthetical things.
Yes.
The other thing we could talk about now, if people are still processing on what they want to talk about in the budget, is the audit, the energy audit that we had discussed earlier and said we would bring back up per the sustainability recommendation. Somewhere between 6 and 30, so it's quite a disparity. I mean, I think the budget is 30 in here. And obviously, I would expect they would do their due diligence to ensure getting a good product at a reasonable price. But I think Dennis is generally quite good at that.
But 30 is what's baked in?
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think so.
So maybe, Dennis, between now and next week, is there any way to zoom into that number a little more accurately? Is that something that can happen in a week? I mean, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounded like it was probably a longer process to find the right person to do it. But I mean, even if they can, I don't know, as long as it's not more than the 30, if that's what's baked in.
Well, that was the range that was given to us.
The range that was given to you.
Yeah,
Could you go to the mic?
I was trying to save him the trip by just repeating what he said.
I knew that. I was
good
getting
to
up,
stand
and then
every
I
so often.
got lazy. I didn't do it. But yeah, I mean, I will make as many calls as I can. I have some leads, and I know I know who to ask, and I should be able to pull something together.
Are there any like rebates from Efficiency Maine to
there's
encourage
tons of
people to
them
do
right
these
now.
types
There's
of
tons
audits?
of them right now, and I'm looking at all of them. I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Lighting, prescriptive lighting.
I was just thinking just the audit, like for the audit.
I don't know. I ask. I'm not shy. I'll ask.
What?
Yeah.
There are for homes, yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not shy about asking. I have some connections there, so.
All right. Make it happen, Dennis.
I'll do whatever I can.
Well, thank you. I mean, you would have to do it later anyway, so
Right.
just count it as doing it now.
Pre-work.
Rather than later.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great.
Suzanne,
No
yeah.
problem.
I think one of the concerns that came up with the cost with the audit, and Dennis would know more with this as well, is that the lower cost ones tend either not to be independent or might be tied in with
a purchase.
And so, right, you're saving money on the audit, but then you've committed ahead of time
buy from them.
buying from them or do that. Whereas the
And I don't
more
think-
expensive one
I
is
think we're
more
required to
independent.
bid certain things out, so that could be a problem. Although that wouldn't stop us from bidding. I don't think it would stop us from bidding it out anyway if we made that clear. I mean, right up front. We have bidding requirements, so we
Right.
can't just.
So that $6,000 audit just became 12.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
or 30.
it's all relative, but
yeah.
But there was discussion that we're spending the $30,000 anyway in some form.
Mm-hmm.
Do you spend it in the audit and then you have your free option of choices, or do you spend your $6,000 and then you're locked into
Tied in,
something else later, which you're spending that same money on?
That's a
So
good point.
that was one of the big concerns.
Yeah, I definitely would be in favor of an independent audit.
yeah, it's probably more accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know-
I
I'll
don't
make
expect
some
it's going to
calls.
be closer to 6, but
Where specifically is that 30,000 listed in the budget? I was looking, and you probably can point me right to it.
And would you go to the mic? Thank you.
And this is the first year we changed the article numbers are different, and
Let's
none
see,
of us
it's
know where
in
anything is
Article
anymore, so don't feel
9.
bad. Okay. Article 9.
Yes. I know I put it in like purchase professional services. Yeah, so it would be on page 41 in purchased or in professional services. Let's see. See, it's going up from $3,940 to $35,140. So it's in there.
Thank you.
Kate.
When we are adding these things here that we're talking about, can we make sure they get on this sheet and in this budget adjustment list?
Yes.
Yeah, just because we do have things that are smaller dollar size that we're referencing on here. I mean, obviously this was one that, I can see why I guess you did add it to the budget, so.
I did.
Could have made it on there.
Yeah. It just
I was gonna say, it's
somehow
not like we just
missed
sprung it on you,
there.
but. All right. Other comments, questions? Things that would help you deliberate in an effective manner? Is your brain sufficiently fried for the evening and we're done? Oh, Beth.
Just a question, because we talked last time about employing some independent financial advice for cost sharing.
Yeah.
Where does that money come from, and where would that be? Is it in the budget here?
We're all looking at Ann. Did we include it in there anywhere? In any?
We did not. I would just think that would come out of like the superintendent's budget under purchase professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't add it. We didn't even really talk about the cost so much, did we?
Right.
We just talked about that. Our first meeting since that suggestion was made was tonight, and so we just talked about that tonight at the finance committee meeting, and we were talking about we have some individuals that we could potentially talk to, but it won't be till May that they're available, so we don't have like a dollar amount yet.
But I mean, there have been other things that we have, you know, when we transitioned finance, like we've brought people in to help and be right?
And been able to cover it in.
Yeah, I mean,
existing
I don't think
lines.
the anticipation is going to be a huge dollar amount.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure how
Yeah.
it all worked, and
Yeah.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Well, if folks don't have any other additional questions or information requests for next week's meeting, then I would take a motion to adjourn. Oh, no.
This was going to go in board comment, but I guess I would just ask Becky and her team to consider any potential cost implications or savings implications from the, now this is a year out, the implementation of LD, what was it? Question 1, LD 798, how many students we anticipate potentially leaving the district. And I understand that's very a complex question, but, and it's still in committee with various amendments being proposed. So I don't know if there are implications for this budget necessarily, but if you could just give it a thought, and if there are, I'd like to know that.
I
What-
think,
oh,
well,
sorry. I was just, when does that go into effect? Is it next fall?
September 2021.
Oh,
Not
not
this
this
year,
year.
but next year. So that's why I was like, oh, well, maybe not. But,
And I
but,
think
but I mean, potentially, we could see people leave sooner. Mhm.
I think what I would do to research it is just to see if our nurses, and I'm looking at Bonnie. Bonnie. So Bonnie, so our nurses must know if we do not, who we have that's not vaccinated
And
due
it
to
wouldn't-
philosophical reasons, or do we?
It's not just not vaccinated, it's not on the state mandated vaccination schedule. So that could be as little as having missed one booster.
But that's the same rule as net. Like those people would
Yeah.
have to be getting an exemption today already, is my understanding. So it's like people who are under exemptions that are not medical exemptions, right? Those are the people that would be impacted by that new law.
Do we have that information? Do you know?
I don't know if it's specific to philosophical reasons, but I will check with them.
Okay.
I think it's got to be, right? We got to.
They do have documentation. Do you know, Emily?
So I asked our nurse this question this week, and she was able to pull up we have 6 students in our building who don't meet the state requirement.
Do you
So
know
we
the
have,
reason, though?
yes, the reason's documented, so the parent selects a box and can write something below that.
Oh, good.
And all of ours were philosophical. Of those 6, they're all philosophical.
So we can pull that number.
So we can pull that number.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I would say speak now or forever hold your peace until next Wednesday. All right, well, I would take a motion to adjourn. Valley, second. Susanna, thanks. All those in favor? Great, thank you.